Hello there, my name is Jasom Jensai. Welcome to Star Wars Duels. This episode will be Adi Gallia versus Kit Fisto. If you've never seen an episode of Star Wars Duels before, this is how it's going to work. I'll start by analyzing each combatant's physical skills. Then I'll go over their force abilities. I'll end the analysis with a potential duel scenario. The battlefield for that duel will be the hangar of a Venator-class Star Cruiser. Kit Fisto was a quick fighter. When he, Kolar, Tin, and Windu confronted Sidious, both Kolar and Tin were unable to block a single attack from Sidious. Fisto managed to block 3 before he was cut down. However, Sidious attacked Kolar and Tin first before turning to Windu, and finally Fisto. While Kolar and Tin were taken by surprise, Fisto had a couple of seconds to prepare himself. Nevertheless, Fisto's achievement required incredible speed. Fisto's duel with Sidious was short. A longer demonstration of his speed is his duel with Grievous. Fisto was able to not only keep up with Grievous, he was able to outpace Grievous. Grievous's forearms and mechanical joints made him one of the fastest warriors of the time, but Fisto was able to take him on with confidence. Fisto's speed is aided by his skill. His wide sweeping slashes flow efficiently from one to another. Each strike is neatly followed by another, but Fisto isn't rushed. His timing is just as crucial as his efficiency. He doesn't just block every strike that comes his way, nor does he rely solely on evasion. Fisto bides his time. When his opponent overextends, Fisto avoids the strike, allowing his opponent to throw themselves off balance. When his opponent hesitates, he meets their attack with a solid parry and begins his own offensive. When he's the aggressor, Fisto overwhelms them with a steady stream of attacks. His timing is one of the most important aspects of his physicality. When it comes to strength, Fisto is much less accomplished. He was able to match Grievous and Sidious, who were strong, but this doesn't mean Fisto is especially strong. Fisto was able to kill Gore, Grievous' pet Rogwar, but it's hard to say exactly how tough Gore really was. Fisto seems to be of average strength for a Jedi. In his battle with Rift Tamsin, Fisto was able to shrug off at least one blow to the face. Rift Tamsin is a Karkor gun. He was vicious and powerful when fighting underwater. Other than this brief fight with Tamsin, Fisto doesn't really have any notable feats for toughness. Fisto had average strength and toughness, but he was incredibly fast, a trait he emphasized with efficient flowing movements and skilled timing. During her duel with Savage, Adi Gallia showed her agility. She landed a solid kick and was able to avoid several attacks. Adi Gallia also had duels with Grievous. In their first encounter, Adi Gallia took Grievous by surprise. The droid general quickly recovered, but Gallia still managed to land a kick to his face. Before their fight could resolve, it was interrupted by a boarding ramp breaking away and opening into the vacuum of space. In their second duel, Gallia again kept up with Grievous before he landed a kick to her stomach. The duel doesn't end there, but we don't get to see the rest of it. Though Gallia was captured, this could easily be due to her ship being overwhelmed by droids rather than by Grievous. Though on paper these fights demonstrate incredible speed, Gallia's fighting style relied more on her strength. Each of her attacks against Grievous forced him to put his strength behind his parries, slowing him down. While Grievous is strong, Savage Repress is much stronger. When Adi Gallia took on Savage, she was forced to retreat. Her style relies on her strength, allowing her to take the offensive, but Savage was stronger. Despite this, Gallia was able to block several of Savage's strikes one-handed before she resorted to exclusively two-handed parries. Gallia may look like a quick fighter, but she is primarily strength-based. Gallia may be strong, but she isn't really that tough. At the end of her duel with Savage, she was blasted back by a force push. She was dazed for a second, which gave Savage enough time to headbutt her with his horny hand. Gallia crumbled to the ground, and Savage finished her off with his lightsaber. Gallia is a quick fighter, but strength is her strong suit. Her toughness isn't as impressive as her other qualities, but she is still a great fighter. Fisto and Gallia seem to be about the same literal speed, but Fisto's swift flowing movements make Gallia's more strong and steady style seem slow. Furthermore, Fisto had better timing, which would allow him to take advantage of any small mistakes Gallia might make. Though Fisto is faster, Gallia is stronger. Gallia's strength advantage is amplified by her solid stance. Gallia's strength might allow her to keep Fisto from attacking as fast as he would against an average opponent, but I still think he would be able to overwhelm her. Though Gallia's attacks might slow him down if he parries, he could just as easily evade her attack, which would allow Fisto to keep his normal pace. Toughness will likely play a very small role in this duel. Neither was anywhere near tough enough to survive a lightsaber strike, and of the two, Gallia is far more likely to land a physical strike. Fisto's average toughness would allow him to tank such an attack, but he wouldn't take advantage of her slightly lessened toughness with a similar attack, though he might land a force push. They both had a near average toughness, and neither utilized physical strikes with a high frequency. Ultimately, I think Fisto would win. Though she was slightly stronger, Fisto's timing would allow him to circumvent Adi Gallia's advantage somewhat. Most importantly, his speed was well above Gallia's own speed. Fisto has the physical advantage. Fisto is known for his restraint. This restraint makes it difficult to tell how powerful he is with the Force, but it also allows him to fight with excellent timing. Such precise timing requires speed. Instead of simply throwing out a quick Force push when he's overwhelmed, or launching a powerful Force push to finish off his enemies, Fisto launches lightning-fast Force pushes after a series of quick lightsaber strikes. However, Fisto's restraint limits how often he uses the Force. Though he integrates Force powers into combat seamlessly, he doesn't do it often. Fisto's precision is untested. We know with reasonable certainty that he is able to construct a lightsaber, but that is the extent of what we know. During the Mon Cala campaign, he, Skywalker, Padme, and Jar Jar were captured. They were kept in cages formed via electric eels that would shock them when they tried to move. In an attempt to get the Jedi to talk, Rift Hansen broke Padme's scuba helmet, leaving her to drown. Anakin and Fisto together formed a bubble of air around Padme's head, allowing her to breathe. Their bubble broke when Anakin was shocked by one of the electric eels. Fisto, with the help of Anakin, was capable of holding back the pressure of the entire ocean. Fisto is incredibly strong, and he has the ability to strike with extreme speed. That right there is the only Force push we see from Adi Gallia. I guess it was a quick Force push, but not really that notably quick. Kid Fisto clearly wins the Force abilities advantage. Though Gallia could very well be just as powerful as Fisto, it's unclear, and even if she was, she likely wouldn't use her powers anyways. Kid Fisto was assigned to capture Nute Gunray on the planet Vasic. He, a few clones, and his former apprentice, Nadar Veb, approached the Dark Castle where the beacon was leading. The clones wanted to blow the door open while Nadar thought a lightsaber would be better. After calming them down, Fisto took a closer look. His caution paid off. He found a hidden button on the door, which opened it with no need for violence. They crept through the corridors and eventually found Nute Gunray with several battle droids. The Jedi made short work of the battle droids, but afterward, Fisto reprimanded Nadar for his aggressiveness. Then it was revealed that Nute Gunray was actually just a hologram, and the Jedi had been lured into a trap. Kind of. The Jedi soon discovered they were in Grievous's lair, and set a trap for him. When Grievous walked in the door, he found no guards. The Jedi jumped out of the shadows with several clones. The clones turned on their headlamps, blinding Grievous. Fisto confidently asked for Grievous's surrender, instead of taking advantage of his surprise. Grievous attacked, but the Jedi flanked him and protected the clones behind them. They attempted to lock him in a blade lock, while the clones launched cables to hold Grievous in place. Grievous resisted and continued to fight. Fisto was able to slice off Grievous's legs, but instead of giving in, Grievous grabbed onto the ceiling and began pulling away. Fisto inexplicably hung back for several seconds as the clones struggled and Nadar attacked. After Grievous successfully fended off Nadar with the twirl of his lightsaber, Fisto disarmed him with a well-timed slash. Grievous then used the clones as weapons. Fisto and Nadar were both unable to attack Grievous without hurting the clones, and so Grievous escaped. After fighting Grievous's Rogwart and Gore, and losing the last of the clones, the Jedi discovered where Grievous's control room was. But as he and Nadar entered, Nadar hung back. He wanted to take Grievous on himself. Nadar wanted revenge, and his pride blinded him to the consequences. Alone against Grievous and his minions, Fisto called for his droid to pick him up at a balcony. As he was waiting, Grievous arrived. He attacked, but by twirling his blades around incredibly quickly, but Fisto was not thrown off. After a brief exchange, Fisto melted into the fog. He attacked Grievous from behind, but Grievous's plot armor allowed him to sense where Fisto was about to attack without the Force. Fisto taunted Grievous, provoking him. Fisto ducked underneath Grievous's predictable attack and took advantage of Grievous's overextension with a well-timed slash. He cut off Grievous's hand and reclaimed Nadar Veb's lightsaber. With that, he attacked. Fisto struck quickly. He did nothing fancy, instead using the simplistic slashes of Form 1 to overwhelm Grievous. When Grievous pushed back, Fisto jumped to the side and knocked Grievous to the ground with a well-timed Force push. Fisto did not follow up though. Instead, he waited for Grievous to attack. He fended off Grievous's attacks for a bit, staying barely in range where Grievous's attacks were the weakest. As soon as Grievous paused to reassess his strategy, Fisto pressed forward. Again, he used the simplicity of Form 1 to attack with uninhibited speed. Just as he was near to overwhelming Grievous, 3 Magna Guards showed up and he was forced to retreat. Just then, his droid arrived with his ship and Fisto escaped. Kid Fisto's control allowed him to take advantage of the mistakes his opponent makes. Because he was not already pushing himself to his full power, he was always ready to take advantage of an open with a burst of speed or a simple movement. Yet this same restraint that allowed him to see things so clearly also slowed him down. In his first encounter with Grievous, he was unable to do much and instead relied on the clones and Nadar. Even though he was fast enough to beat Grievous on his own, Grievous escaped. Then, when he took on Grievous for the final time, he used his restraint to wait for the perfect moment to dodge and followed up by slicing off Grievous' wrist. Later, his control allowed him to knock Grievous to the ground with a well-timed force push. However, his restraint kept him from fully taking advantage of his success. Even though Grievous was on the ground and defenseless, Kid Fisto hung back and did nothing. This restraint applied to his force powers as well. When Fisto used the force, it was quick and well-timed, but he didn't use the force often because of his restraint. Fisto's restraint was a blessing and a curse. Kid Fisto was a practitioner of Form 1, though he incorporated many elements of Form 4 as well. Fisto's style was simplistic. He used wide, sweeping strikes that flowed smoothly together. The simplicity of Form 1 allowed him to fully utilize his timing. Instead of the complex movements of Form 2, the rigid movements of Form 5, or the chaotic movements of Form 7, Form 1 allowed Fisto to act without thought and take advantage of the flow of battle quickly and effectively. Fisto's hints of Form 4 complicated his movements, but the acrobatics helped him to evade attacks and control the battle through mobility. Unlike most Form 4 users, Fisto didn't utilize physical strikes in combat, instead relying on his lightsaber. This is because Fisto didn't worry about attacking from multiple angles. He was only worried about the agility that Form 4 gave him. Fisto's style and strategy was focused on control. He fought simply but effectively. This made him somewhat predictable and kept him from finishing off his opponents quickly, but it protected him from reckless attacks and allowed him to take advantage of his opponent's mistakes. Adi Gallia was less simplistic. She attacked with speed and ferocity. In her first fight with Grievous, she leapt out of nowhere, relying on surprise to finish him. Grievous managed to fight her off with his superior speed, but she landed a kick to his face before they were both nearly vented in his face, along with Kenobi and a few clones. Her next encounter with Grievous was on more even ground. She kept him from moving quickly with her powerful Form 5 counterstrikes, but even still, she was forced to retreat. Eventually, Grievous landed a kick to her stomach, which sent her flying. Savage quickly took the offensive in their duel. At first, she managed to block some of the strikes with a single hand, but she soon resorted to two hands. As time went on, she was forced to resort more to dodging than blocking, even two-handed. This opened up an opportunity to land a solid kick to Savage's knee, but he was unfazed. Savage ended the fight by knocking her back with a force push, headbutting her with his horns, and stabbing her through the back. Adi Gallia is a practitioner of Form 5, though she was far more agile than most Form 5 users. This is the main reason why she lost to Savage. Form 5 is based on counterattacks, but instead of achieving this through speed or skill, Form 5 achieves this through strength. Instead of a simple block, Form 5 users will meet an attack with their own. Because of their greater strength and leverage, the Form 5 user's attack will overpower their opponents. Thus, a perfect Form 5 user will never be on the defensive. Each attack their opponent launches will be redirected. Usually, a Form 5 user will lose due to lack of speed or finesse. Their solid strikes take more time than many of the other forms, and their rigid attacks can be predictable. However, when Adi Gallia fought Savage, she had a different problem. When she tried to overpower Savage's attack, she simply couldn't. Gallia had mastered the solid stances of Form 5, and she was able to augment her strength to force, but Savage's brute strength was on another level. Unable to take the offensive, her entire style failed. Adi Gallia was quickly overwhelmed and forced to retreat, and eventually, she was killed. Fisto was nowhere near as strong as Savage, so Gallia won't have that problem, but Fisto's greater speed would be a problem for her. Gallia's style relied on her strength and stability, Fisto's on his speed and skill. Stylistically, they merely emphasized their physicality. Adi Gallia preferred to be on the offensive, and when overwhelmed, she would retreat using her agility. She utilized physical strikes but rarely visible force powers. Fisto, on the other hand, was all about restraint. He would defend himself through parries and evasions until he saw an opening. When his opponent made a mistake, he would strike, but he didn't follow up very aggressively. For pure strategy, I favor Adi Gallia. Fisto's restraint gave him a few unique advantages, but it is simply less practical in a duel to the death than Adi Gallia's strategy. However, terrain can play an important factor in a duel, so let's look at the terrain for this duel. The hangar of a Venator-class started cruiser. The hangar bays form two long lines on either side of the exit runway. The hangar bays are open to the bays adjacent. This structure forms a pair of long open spaces with pressurized atmosphere on either side of an unpressurized space. The hangar is filled with crates of supplies and empty ships. The supplies depend on what the ship's carrying at the time, but for this example, let's say it's mostly LAT gunships. Fisto's restrained style would allow him to utilize simplistic environmental advantages, but though there are many terrain advantages to be used, most of them require more time than I could see Fisto committing. Fuel barrels can be exploded, crates can be thrown, the gunships themselves can be piloted, but I can't see Fisto or Gallia utilizing any of these things. There is not much of a terrain advantage, so we return to the Pyrotechnic Lounge, which belongs to Adi Gallia. If you found my analysis to be boring, misinformed, and lacking in artistic flair, feel free to hit the dislike button. If that's not you, may I draw your attention to the like button. With that reminder out of the way, this is where the fun begins. Kid Fisto dashed into the hangar, lightsaber ignited. Not a single clone stood at the ready. No ships were coming in, none were leaving. The room was empty of life, except for at the far end. Adi Gallia stood conferring with Onyekwe, with dozens of weapons strapped to his body. Onyekwe looked up and quickly retreated at the far doorway. "You have let yourself be consumed by your pride," Fisto called. His strong voice filled the empty chamber. "You don't understand, Fisto. You would never," Gallia replied. "We don't have to fight." The silence stretched for a second. "You know it's inevitable. Search your feelings. All the delays in the galaxy will not lead us down a different path. I will do what I must." Inwardly, he was conflicted. The Jedi stood for unity, but they also stood for peace and freedom. A proper Jedi should be controlled, and those that couldn't, well, Gallia was right. This conflict was inevitable. "So be it." Gallia dashed forward. Fisto ran to meet her. He let his muscles relax and began focusing on his instincts, on the Force. The future stretched in front of him in a few more seconds. Her lightsaber slashed down at Fisto. Fisto launched himself to the side, avoiding attack. Gallia landed in a solid stance, boiling like a spring before launching herself at Fisto again. Fisto blocked a flurry of hard strikes. He let his subconscious take control of his immediate reactions, aided by the Force. Adi Gallia was an aggressive fighter. She had mastered Form 5 and no longer moved with the clumsiness of a Rancor like many Form 5 beginners. Instead, she was more like a Nexus, darting forward with one powerful attack after another. Her foot swept forward, connecting with his legs, and sending him to the ground. Her lightsaber followed him down, but he rolled backward to avoid it. A pause in the fight. "You fight desperately at Gallia." "Me? You're the one retreating. I'd say you're a Form 3 practitioner if I didn't recognize the basic Form 1 movements you call mastery. I fear the warrior who has mastered a single movement more than the warrior who has tried 1,000. Philosophy won't win you this fight, Fisto." "No, but my basic Form 1 movements certainly will." Fisto smiled, but it didn't last long. He was fighting a fellow Jedi. He wished for a way to end the conflict. She must have had similar thoughts, because she hesitated for a moment. Fisto quickly tamed his motions and shot them in the back of his mind. Again, he let subconscious take control. He leapt forward with wide sweeps of his blade. Gallia instinctively overpowered the attacks and followed up with her own strikes. Fisto backpedaled, blocking her strikes. He leapt to the top of an LAAT. Adi Gallia followed him, but he leapt to the side and knocked her out of the air with a force push. She landed on the edge of the LAAT, almost caught herself, but fell behind it. Fisto landed in the crouch before leaping over the top of the LAAT and landing on the other side. Gallia attacked, but Fisto danced inside and began a series of swift attacks. Gallia retreated toward the edge of the hangar before taking the advantage. As she pushed forward, Fisto took a step back before smoothly returning to his attacks. Gallia tried to lock him in a blade lock, but he saw the attempt and maneuvered out of it. Gallia's leg shot forward as he disengaged, but he was able to knock it aside with his elbow. Gallia used the momentum to twirl around and aim a powerful crosscut at Fisto. Fisto saw his chance. He ducked under the attack, the blade swept just above his head and continued. Fisto brought his own blade in an uppercut toward Gallia, but amazingly, she jumped backward just in time to avoid the attack. Another pause. Gallia lowered back into a stance and took a deep breath. The hum of their lightsabers and their heavy breathing was the only sound in the hangar. Fisto was flanked by 2 LAATs, but Gallia, who was closer to the edge of the hangar, was by herself. Gallia stepped forward. Fisto let himself retreat as she rained blows down on him, though he stood his ground more than before. Occasionally, he attacked to push her back and keep her on her toes, but for the most part, he simply parried her strikes. She was deceptively small. Each strike surprised him with how much force was behind it. He was giving ground faster than he wanted. He would have to bait her. Gallia knocked his blade off. He let her attack knock him back. She quickly followed up with a wide, powerful slash. Her attack knocked his lightsaber out of his hand, but she had overextended. Her foot swung around to follow her saber, nearly slamming into Fisto's face, but he leaned back out of the way. Gallia quickly followed up with one last lightsaber strike, but before it connected, Fisto knocked her back with a small force push. Gallia stumbled back. Fisto had meant to knock her back farther than that. He would have to try harder next time. No, there wouldn't be a next time. Gallia was jumping toward him. He stepped fearlessly toward her deadly blade and lifted his hand. Drawing from the force, he launched a wave of power toward Gallia. Gallia was flung backward away from him. She hit the ground and rolled, but she didn't stop. Fisto watched her slide past the barrier separating the hangar's atmosphere from the void of space. Gallia quickly emptied her lungs, but there was no rescue. Fisto watched as his colleague began to suffocate. Her lips pleaded soundlessly. Fisto had known her for decades. Memories swept through Fisto's head, mingling with the present. Tears formed at the edges of Gallia's eyes. She had failed her Jedi trials. Her overconfidence. No, they had just heard of the Thalafian massacre. Or was it? Her eyes closed. Memories of meditating in the council chambers. Too many to number. On the mission to Castellon. But no, it was different. her pain and sadness was vividly written on her face. Her life force slowly pulsed these emotions, powerful and barely tamed. Her life dwindled and was finally snuffed out. Fisto was brought back to the present. He fought to maintain his Jedi serenity, as he felt the absence of his colleague, the absence of his friend. Adi Gallia is a skilled warrior, but Fisto would win. Adi Gallia is slightly stronger, Fisto is substantially faster. In addition, Fisto is stronger with the Force, faster with the Force, and more willing to use the Force. Adi Gallia had a slight tactical advantage, but it wasn't enough to beat Kit Fisto. Kit Fisto would win 65% of the time. Of course, that's just my opinion. I'd be honored if you would take the time to tell me yours in the comments. May the Force be with you.